In the spring of 2025, the world changed. A single announcement from Washington, D.C. shattered global markets, stunned long-standing allies, and ignited the largest economic confrontation of the 21st century. This is the story of disruption, retaliation, and the uncertain world that followed. Chapter 1. Liberation Day, the shock tariff surge. The day the United States imposed massive tariffs on its biggest trading partners and sent shockwaves around the world. The story opens on Liberation Day, April 29, 2025, when the U.S. unveiled sweeping tariffs on major trading partners: China, Canada, Mexico, the EU, Japan, and others. Tariff stacking was introduced with autos, pharmaceuticals, steel, copper, and more hit with rates up to 145% on Chinese goods and up to 50% on steel and aluminum from many nations. The announcement sent shockwaves through financial markets. The US dollar fluctuated sharply. Global investors braced for a downturn. Controversy centered on its legality and rationale. Critics called it the largest trade war in history, questioning whether the president had overstepped legal authority via the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEEPA. Chapter 2. U.S. versus China, an economic Cold War. Focus shifts to the epicenter, U.S.-China. At the height, U.S. tariffs soared to 145%. While China retaliated with 125% duties on American goods. Economically, the impact is enormous. $582 billion in annual bilateral trade at risk. American prices rising, disrupted supply chains, and forecasts of recession. Public opinion is sharply divided. A Pew survey found most Americans believed that tariffs would hurt their country and themselves personally, despite frustration that China benefits more from the trade relationship. This chapter explores whether the tariffs achieved Trump's goal to revitalize U.S. manufacturing, especially in light of empirical findings that retaliation largely erased potential gains. Chapter 3. Tariff Politics versus Constitutional Law, the VOS Selections Case. Here we enter the legal battlefield. In VOS Selections, Inc. v. United States, small importers and several U.S. states sued, claiming the executive branch exceeded constitutional authority by imposing tariffs under IEEPA. On May 28, 2025, the Court of International Trade ruled those tariffs unconstitutional and permanently enjoined them, but the administration appealed, and the order is stayed pending full review before the full Federal Circuit on July 31, 2025. That legal tug-of-war has become a flashpoint over separation of powers and checks and balances. Chapter 4. Global Spillovers, Canada, Mexico, EU, and beyond. This chapter turns outside the U.S.-China axis. In early 2025, the U.S. extended tariffs to Canada and Mexico, threatening renegotiation of USMCA and prompting WTO disputes. Canada retaliated with tariffs on rapeseed oil, pork, and steel. Mexico promoted a Made in Mexico campaign and saw rising anti-U.S. sentiment. In Europe, the U.S. threatened tariffs up to 50% on pharmaceutical and auto exports, prompting emergency talks in Scotland. The EU prepared counter-tariffs on U.S. beef, beer, and airplanes. Industry figures like LVMH's Bernard Arnault campaigned to avert spillover effects, warning that European luxury exports were already down sharply amid trade uncertainty. Chapter 5. Tech and Rare Earth Tensions, a New Weapon. This segment explores the tech-industrial dimension of the 2025 trade war. China capitalized on its near monopoly in rare earths, essential for semiconductors and military tech, as leverage in negotiations. The U.S., in turn, imposed proposed tariffs on semiconductors and pharmaceuticals as high as 200%, including an explicit threat on Apple. This raised alarm among economists. Is a tech war implicitly underway? Suppliers scrambled to diversify away from China. National security intertwined with trade policy. Beijing framed U.S. actions as containment while urging industrial self-reliance. Chapter 6: Domestic Fallout, American Consumers, Firms, and the Economy. This chapter examines the real consequences at home. Analysts predict U.S. GDP could fall by 1% by 2028, and real wages decline around 1.4% under the current tariff regime. Consumers faced rising costs. Tariffs were largely passed on to Americans via inflationary price hikes on goods from electronics to automobiles. Some industries saw growth, but many others, especially services and agriculture, suffered. Empirical studies show new business formation increased under tariffs, but retaliatory effects negated those benefits. Trade policy uncertainty also pushed U.S. firms to invest in ESG improvements and green innovation to differentiate themselves amid increasing international competition. Chapter 7: Resolution or Escalation, Negotiations and the Road Ahead. In this final chapter, we examine whether the trade war will ease or intensify. In Stockholm talks scheduled late July, negotiators from the U.S. and China aim to extend a temporary truce before an August 12th deadline to avoid tariffs re-escalating above 100%. With potential Trump-Xi summit in October, global watchers ponder whether diplomacy can regain ground or if the world moves toward entrenched decoupling. Meanwhile, proposed U.S. legislation, the Trade Review Act of 2025, would rein executive power by requiring congressional approval for tariffs beyond 60 days, mooted by a strong veto threat from the White House. As of now, markets remain volatile, global alliances shift, and stakeholders weigh whether a stable, rules-based system is salvageable, or whether the world is entering an era of permanent economic fragmentation.